The morphine made everything feel like it was happening underwater. Kurt lay in the narrow hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles that had water stains shaped like countries he'd never visited. His left arm was in a cast. His ribs were wrapped tight enough to make breathing an exercise in deliberate effort, and every time he moved, his body reminded him that motorcycles and wet Seattle streets don't play well together. The accident had been stupid, entirely his own fault. He'd been riding too fast, thinking too hard about the tour that was supposed to start in 3 days, not paying enough attention to the road conditions. The bike had gone down on a curve, and Kurt had taken a slide across 20 feet of asphalt before coming to a stop against a guardrail. He was lucky to be alive, according to the doctors. Lucky to have nothing worse than a broken arm, 3 cracked ribs, and enough road rash to keep him looking like he'd gone 10 rounds with a cheese grater. The tour was postponed. The band was pissed. The label was having panic attacks about insurance and liability. But lying here in room 314 of Seattle General, drifting in and out of drug-induced haze, Kurt found himself oddly peaceful. For the first time in months, he had nowhere to be, nothing to do except heal. It was almost a relief. The night shift nurse was named Janet, and she hummed while she worked. Kurt had been in the hospital for 2 days before he really noticed it. The pain medication kept him drifting in and out of consciousness, and at first the humming was just another layer of hospital background noise, like the beeping monitors and the squeaking wheels of meal carts and the distant sound of televisions playing in other rooms. But on his second night, during one of his wakeful periods around 3 a.m., Kurt realized that Janet wasn't just humming random melodies. She was humming his songs. Specifically, she was humming Lithium. It was surreal to lie there in the dark, wrapped in hospital blankets that smelled like industrial detergent, listening to this middle-aged nurse with graying hair and sensible shoes, unconsciously reproducing the melody from one of his most personal songs. Janet moved around his room efficiently, checking his IV, noting numbers on charts, adjusting his position to prevent bed sores, all while quietly humming the chorus to a song about bipolar disorder and the search for spiritual numbness. "Nice choice," Kurt said quietly when she paused near his bedside table to update his chart. Janet looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I wake you? I didn't realize I was humming out loud." "You weren't loud. I've just got good ears for my own music." Janet's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, and then something that looked like embarrassment. "Your music?" "Yeah, I'm Kurt Cobain, from Nirvana. That song you were humming? I wrote it." Janet set down her pen and really looked at him. For the first time since he'd been admitted, Kurt was used to being recognized, but the hospital setting made everything weird. Without his usual clothes, his hair matted from lying in bed, his face bruised from the accident, he probably didn't look much like the person on album covers. "Oh my God," Janet said softly. "I had no idea. The admission forms just said Kurt Donald Cobain, and I don't usually pay attention to patient names unless there's something medically relevant." "It's okay," Kurt said. "Actually, it's been nice being anonymous for a couple days, but I'm curious. Why were you humming that particular song? Do you know it well?" Janet's expression grew complicated. Yes, I know it well. I probably know it better than I should, honestly." "What do you mean?" Janet glanced toward the door, then back at Kurt. "Can I ask you something? And please tell me if this is too personal, but that song, Lithium, what's it about? I have my own interpretation, but I'd like to know what you intended." Kurt shifted slightly in bed, trying to find a position that didn't make his ribs scream. "It's about mental illness, about the way people sometimes use religion or medication or any kind of external structure to try to manage internal chaos. The lithium in the title is literal. It's a drug they use to treat bipolar disorder." Janet nodded slowly. "That's what I thought. The lyrics are, They're very specific about certain feelings, about what it's like to need something outside yourself, just to feel normal. Yeah, exactly. Why do you ask? Janet was quiet for a moment, and Kurt could see her weighing whether to share something personal with a patient she'd just discovered was famous. Finally, she seemed to make a decision. "I sing that song to one of my patients," she said. "A 16-year-old boy named Marcus. He's terminal, leukemia, and he has really bad insomnia, partly from the pain and partly from the anxiety about dying so young. But when I sing Lithium, when I hum it, really, I'm not much of a singer. He can fall asleep." Kurt felt something cold settle in his stomach. Jesus. How long does he have? Maybe a month. Maybe less. He's been here for 6 weeks already. His parents visit during the day, but at night he gets scared. And that song, somehow it calms him down. He says the melody makes him feel like he's floating. Kurt closed his eyes. The idea that his song about mental anguish and chemical dependency was being used as a lullaby for a dying teenager was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "Can I ask you something else?" Janet said. "And again, please tell me if this is inappropriate. But would you consider meeting him? Marcus, I mean. He doesn't know who you are. I've never told him I got the song from an album, just that it was something I knew. But if you're comfortable with it..." Kurt opened his eyes and looked at Janet. In the dim light, from the hallway, he could see that she was genuinely concerned about her patient, not trying to arrange some kind of celebrity meet and greet for the novelty of it. "What's he like?" Kurt asked. Janet's face softened. "He's remarkable. Really. Most kids his age, facing what he's facing, they'd be angry or depressed or just shut down completely. But Marcus, he's curious about everything. He asks questions about how medical equipment works. He wants to know about the other patients. He reads constantly. It's like he's trying to experience as much as possible in whatever time he has left." Kurt thought about being 16 and facing death. He thought about all the things he'd taken for granted at that age. The assumption that there would always be more time, more opportunities, more chances to figure out who he was supposed to be. "He sounds like someone I'd like to meet," Kurt said. Janet's smile was grateful and relieved. "Really? You'd be okay with that?" "More than okay. When does your shift usually get quiet enough for something like that?" "Around 4 in the morning. That's when Marcus usually gets his worst insomnia, and it's when the hospital is at its most peaceful." Kurt looked at the clock on his bedside table. It was 3:47 a.m. "How about now?" Janet hesitated. "Are you sure? I mean, you're still recovering from a serious accident. You should be resting." "I've been resting for 2 days, and honestly, lying here thinking about a kid who can't sleep because he's dying. That's not exactly restful." Janet nodded. "Okay. Let me get a wheelchair for you. Moving around is probably good for your recovery anyway. Helps prevent blood clots." 10 minutes later, Kurt was sitting in a wheelchair being pushed through the quietly humming corridors of the hospital's pediatric wing. The change in atmosphere was immediate and depressing. Everything was painted in bright, cheerful colors that seemed to mock the seriousness of childhood illness. Cartoon characters smiled down from the walls, and inspirational posters proclaimed things like, "Every day is a gift," in fonts that belonged on birthday cards. Marcus's room was at the end of the hall, and even from a distance Kurt could see light coming from under the door. "He's awake," Janet said softly. "He usually is around this time." She knocked gently and pushed the door open. The room was larger than Kurt's, with space for medical equipment and family members, but it had the same institutional feeling, everything designed for function rather than comfort. Marcus was propped up in bed, reading a paperback book under the harsh fluorescent lighting. He was exactly what Kurt had expected, and nothing like what he'd prepared for. Obviously sick, clearly frail, but with bright, intelligent eyes that looked up with curiosity rather than self-pity when they entered. "Hey, Marcus," Janet said quietly. "I brought someone to meet you. This is Kurt. He's a patient too. Motorcycle accident." Marcus looked at Kurt with the frank assessment that teenagers reserve for adults they're meeting for the first time. "That sucks about the accident. Are you going to be okay?" "Yeah, I'll be fine in a few weeks. Nothing that won't heal." Kurt gestured toward Marcus's book. "What are you reading?" Marcus held up the paperback, a science fiction novel Kurt didn't recognize. "It's about time travel. This guy keeps going back and trying to change things, but every time he does, he makes something else worse. It's pretty depressing, actually, but in a good way." Kurt laughed, surprised by the kid's matter-of-fact assessment. "Depressing in a good way. I like that." "Janet says you have trouble sleeping," Kurt continued. "I have that problem too sometimes." "Racing thoughts?" Marcus nodded. "That, plus the pain medication makes me feel weird, and there's always some machine beeping somewhere. But mostly it's just, my brain won't shut up. It keeps thinking about stuff." "What kind of stuff?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying Kurt's face like he was trying to decide how honest to be. "Death stuff, mostly. Like, what it's going to feel like, whether it'll hurt, what happens after. Normal 16-year-old thoughts, right?" The casual way Marcus talked about his own mortality was jarring. Kurt had met plenty of people who claimed to be comfortable with death. But this kid genuinely seemed to have achieved a kind of acceptance that most adults never reached. "I don't know if those are normal thoughts for anyone," Kurt said, "but they seem like pretty reasonable thoughts for someone in your situation." "Yeah, that's what I figure. I mean, it's going to happen whether I think about it or not, so I might as well try to understand it." Janet moved around the room quietly, checking monitors and adjusting things, but Kurt could tell she was listening to the conversation. "Janet tells me she sings to help you sleep," Kurt said. Marcus smiled. "She's got this song she hums sometimes. It's really pretty, kind of sad, but in a peaceful way. It makes me think of floating in water." Kurt looked at Janet, who gave him a small nod. "The thing is, Marcus," Kurt said carefully, "that song Janet hums, I wrote it." Marcus's eyebrows went up. "You're a musician?" "Yeah. The song is called Lithium, and it's by my band, Nirvana." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Wait, Nirvana? Like Smells Like Teen Spirit, Nirvana? That's us. Holy shit." Marcus looked at Janet apologetically. "Sorry, Janet, but seriously, you're Kurt Cobain?" "Seriously." Marcus leaned back against his pillows, looking stunned. "This is so weird. I mean, I've heard your music, obviously. Everyone has. But I never... I mean, the song Janet hums doesn't sound like your other stuff." "A lot of our songs don't sound like Teen Spirit," Kurt said. "That one just happened to be the one that got popular. Lithium is more personal, I guess. More about internal stuff than external rebellion." "Is it really about mental illness? Because that's what I always thought, but people at school said I was reading too much into it." Kurt was impressed by the kid's insight. "It is. It's about using external things, religion, medication, whatever, to try to manage internal chaos. Sometimes you need something outside yourself, just to feel stable." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Sometimes I feel like the only reason I'm okay is because of all these machines and medications. Like without them, I'd just dissolve or something." That's exactly what the song is about. They talked for another hour, about music, about books, about what it felt like to be dependent on chemistry and technology just to function. Marcus was remarkably articulate about his experience, describing the strange disconnection between his mind, which felt normal, and his body, which was systematically failing him. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said, as Kurt was preparing to leave. "The song, Lithium, does it help you? I mean, Did writing it make the feelings easier to deal with? Kurt considered the question seriously. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, music doesn't fix anything, but it can help you feel less alone.